We'll start by building the interior box. So I've cut out the first 4 items on my cutting guide here that are all for the interior box. So all of the pieces for this construction are double thicknesses. I've already gone ahead and done that glue up so that this is a lot of the construction is based around this interior portion, and we want to make sure it's structurally sound. Before we do the glue up, we want to punch a few holes here. This is the interior box top, which is 12 inches long, and I want to put a 1/4 inch diameter hole in it that is centered 1 inch from the end and centered across the width. So I'm going to use, this is a heavy duty punch, and it will go through this double thickness of chipboard, and I'm going to set it so that it's centered on that 1 inch mark there. So I'll get that centered on there, and that takes care of that. So now to construct the box, we have the box top that we just punched the hole in. We have a box bottom, and the 2 sides, they sit on top of the bottom, like so. Then the long top comes across like this and sits up on the top. And then this interior box end fits into the end that gets extended. So I'm going to do that glue up, and then I'll come back to show you what that looks like. So this is as far as I am right now. I'm just using simple butt joints, and the 2 sides are sitting on top of the bottom, and here I have the end in place, which fits inside of the 2 sides. And now you can see I've added glue to the top, and I'm ready to put my box top on. And the end with a hole in it goes on the end with the that has an end. The open end is over here to my left. And I'm going to make sure I get that open end aligned. And then I'll check to make sure my box is good and square, and then I'll let it sit and dry thoroughly before I go on. So now that our interior box is all dry, we can put the boiler extension on, and that is basically another smaller box that goes underneath this long piece that we have here. The Locomotive's boiler will fit on top of this area. We've got, again, this is double construction. I have my 2 boiler ends, double thickness, and 2 sides, and then the bottom. So we're going to take one of the sides, and we're basically building this the same way that we did to build the interior box. The sides go on, I'm building it upside down, the sides go on top of this this piece with a hole in it, and they should be the same length as what you have left over here if you've constructed carefully. So if not, you can trim them a little bit. They shouldn't be over, but they should be very close to being right on. So I'm going to put several pieces on, and then I'll be back to show you what's going on. So I have one of the sides put on, and then I have one of the ends that's glued right here to the end of the interior box. Then I'm going to do the same, repeat that process at this end, put this end on, and then follow with this side over here. And so I'll get those 2 pieces on, and then I'll be back. So now I have it to this stage, and I'm going to let this dry before I continue. So now this extension is dry enough and set up enough for us to work with, we can put on the bottom. But before we do that, we want to punch a hole in the piece that is called the dowel holder. Now this piece is sized to fit exactly inside of the extension here. Should be a nice snug fit. Before I put it in, I'm going to mark an arrow so I know which direction it's facing in here. And then I want to make sure I've got it set up tight against the front there, and then I'm going to flip it over and then just peek through this hole that's here and make a little plus sign so I know where to punch a hole for the dowel. Again, I'll use my it's one of those things you want to just take a minute and make sure you get it centered on there. And you can test it. And that's pretty good. I can see just a little bit on this front edge here, and so I've got some little files here. I'm just going to come in there and file that down a little bit. And actually it's okay to kind of just go around it a little bit, because what you want to do is make sure that the dowel can go in there easily, but you know, not too wide, not too tight. And then check this hole here too on the top, and if you want to, you can make that just a little bit bigger with your file as well. Alright, so now I have my arrow here, and this piece, when it fits on here, it goes over both of these edges. So what I want to do is make some, this is about 1/8 of an inch thick here on the front from the two thicknesses of chipboard. So if I put two little tick marks there, and then I know that this is going to go on this way, I can line up my dowel holder and get it centered here and here. So there's basically 1/8 of an inch around all three sides there, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that on. And once I glue that on, I'm going to let that set up and dry, and then glue it on to the base here. So I'll do that, and then I'll be back. So I have the base glued on, and I've stuck my dowel in, and I'm just checking for square. You can see I have a little level here. I find that invaluable when making a construction project. But also, if you don't have that, you can use your mat. Here I've got the base lined up against a grid line, and I can see that the dowel can come in here nice and plumb. So that will work well. And this dowel, this is obviously too long. This is going to help us have a way to attach the smokestack at a later stage of the project. So we'll set this aside to dry. In this section, we're going to be working on the cab, and I have in front of me these pieces cut from medium weight chipboard: the cab front and back, the cab sides, and the cab side bottom. There's 2 of each one of those. I also have set aside up here 2 small magnets. These magnets are about 3/8 of an inch in diameter. They're very low profile, about 1/32 of an inch. So we need to do a little preliminary cutting. The cab sides are fine and the bottoms are fine, but on the cab front and back, we need to cut out for the roof line and to fit around the inner box. You can see on the front piece that I've already accomplished that. So what we want to do here is measure down from the top 1/2 inch on either side, 1/2 inch down, and make a tick mark, and then center a tick mark at the top, connect those dots, excuse me, and then cut off these angled pieces will get removed. And then down here at the bottom, we want to center a box that is 1 3/4 inches wide by 1 5/8 inches tall. So it's centered and it's 1 3/4 inches wide and 1 5/8 inches tall. And just cut that piece out. And then I've also marked for magnets here, and I think I measured down from that top peak about 1 1/4 inches. So it's 1 1/4 inches down to this horizontal placement line, and then it's 3/4 of an inch in on either side to the center line. And then I just like to recess, even though these are low profile, I like them to be even lower profile, so I just cut out with my craft knife, go around this circle that's about 1/2 inch in diameter, and remove a thin layer of chipboard. That's not necessary, that's just something I like to do, but that explains, if you're wondering why this looks a lighter color here, it's because I've removed a layer of chipboard there. So, once we remove these pieces that I've cut off, now our back is ready. You just have to stick on the magnets here. And then before we put it together, it's easier to put some paper on it. And what we want to do for the back does not get paper at this time. The front will need a piece that is the same width as the paper, and it's 1/2 inch longer, and so that we can have a tab down here at the bottom. And then for the sides, they are 1/2 inch longer on one side and 1/2 inch longer on the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is, especially on this front, I want to put some really good coverage of score tape, because the boiler is going to attach here in the front, and I want to make sure that all the pieces, when they get stuck to the paper, that the decorative paper is really well adhered to the chipboard. And so here on the sides, there'll be some windows attached here. I think I'll probably fill in with a couple other strips of score tape, or maybe just some ATG adhesive in the center there. So I'll get my papers cut out, my magnets adhered, and then I'll be back to show you the next step. So I have my paper added to the cab front, and you can see I've cut around the opening. I've left 2 1/2 inch tabs at the bottom that I put some score tape on, and I just have it even with the rest of the edges here. And then for the sides, I've made mirror images so that on this side the paper is extending off here and at the bottom, and then it's, like I said, a mirror image on this side. So what we're going to do is wrap this shorter side, the 3 3/4 inch side, and before we do that, we need to trim a little bit down at the corner. So what we want to do is come back in 1/8 of an inch from the side with the tab, and just make a little tick mark if you need to. And then what we're going to do is just cut straight down from there. We're going to remove that piece. Actually, we can cut it just at a slight angle there, just so that it won't get in our way. And then here on this side, we'll cut straight across from there. So we end up with this, where this is 1/8 of an inch back from that edge, and this cut is right along the edge of the chipboard. So now we can just wrap and train this a little bit by using your fingers and then getting, of course, your bone folder out here to get this train to go around that edge. And then we'll just fasten it down with that score tape that we put on there. Give that a good burnish both on the back and then on that side. And we'll do some inking if you get a little cracking like I got here. Don't worry about that. Then you can also give this a little training right here on this edge so that it'll be ready to go underneath the bottom. And then I'll repeat that over here on this side, and then we'll be ready to put the cab together. So I have my 3 pieces here. I'm going to do just a little inking. This is of course optional, but I definitely want to do it on this back edge where I got a little cracking action going on. Now I'm planning to do a finishing with some strips on the corners, but I'm just doing a little inking just in case I change my mind. It's a lot easier to ink these pieces when they're flat than when they are put together. Don't have to ink around the opening there. The boiler will cut that out. Cover it up. And then around here, just get this top edge. Okay, so we're just going to use some butt construction to put these together, and what you want to make sure of is that the edges that you put next to here, that you use the non-wrapped edges, that they go next to that part. So I've got that, and we'll just flip it over here. You can easily see that the non-wrapped edges are coming together here. I'm just going to use some butt joints to put that together. Just butt the 2 pieces up right against each other, and use a cardstock joining strip. I cut mine 3/4 of an inch wide. I put a crease down the center at 3/8 and then put some 1/4 inch score tape on each side of that, and that seems to work well for me. And so I'll just get a couple strips here. And we'll just put these up together. Make sure you keep them nice and in line. And give those a good burnish. Okay, so you can see how our cab is going to come together here. The back is going to, the reason we wrap these edges is the back is actually going to sit inside just a little bit. It's going to be about 1/8 of an inch inside of that back edge. And in order to give it something to rest on, pardon my reach here, on the cutting guide near the bottom of the medium weight chipboard section, it says to cut some ledger strips, and these are just a cut from medium weight chipboard. They're 1/4 of an inch wide, and they have a 1/4 inch score tape on them. And for some of this construction where things kind of meet up and you want to have a nice square edge, they are very helpful. So I'm going to just measure and cut a couple here to go on either side. So it's just the length of the side here, but I'm holding it back at least a 1/16 of an inch from the bottom, so I'm just going to cut a couple of those here. And then, because we want to hold the back, have about 1/8 of an inch of this edge showing to allow for the width of the chipboard, which is a 1/16 of an inch, I'm going to hold these strips back about 3/16 of an inch. Now I have this nice little ruler that I can easily see what's going on. If you don't have a ruler like this, you can use some of your chipboard to help you get to that proper width. I'll just line that up right against my ruler and give that a good burnish. I'll burnish it with my bone folder here in a second, and then repeat this on the other side. So I'll get that on and then I'll be back. Now to put the cab onto our box here, we're going to add some more of the ledger strips, and first we want to measure in 3 7/8 from the opening. I have the opening here on my left, so I'm going to measure in 3 7/8 and draw a line there, and then I'll continue that line down the two sides. You only have to go about an inch and a half or 2 inches, and 3 7/8 again on this side. And then we need to have a strip that comes across here, and let me flip it this way so we're measuring down. Now, in order to allow for the width of the chipboard, since we doubled this chipboard up here, I'm going to put my ruler at the 1.5 inch mark, is splitting those two pieces of chipboard. So right in between those two pieces of chipboard, I'm putting my 1.5 inch mark. To turn it this way so I can see better. I'm going to draw that line on both sides. So the 1.5 inch goes right, splits those two, that double thickness of chipboard. Or, you know, if you wanted to say it, you would be measuring down 1.5 inches plus a 1/16 or 1 9/16 inches down from the top, but I just find it easier to measure 1.5 inches from that middle of the double thickness of chipboard there. So, when we put our ledger strips on, we want to stay back a little bit more than a 1/16 of an inch from this back edge. So I'm going to start by putting in these long ones that go over here. I'm just holding them back about a 1/16 of an inch from both of the lines that I just made. And then I'll remove my backing and put that right on that line. Now for all of we're going to surround the opening. Well, first I'll put this other one back on this side just so I don't forget, and remember, keep it back at least a 1/16 of an inch from both ends. Okay. So for the end of the opening, we want to put a strip along each of the three sides here at the top, but we want to hold it back exactly a 1/16 of an inch. So if you want to draw a line there, you can, or you can use the width of a piece of chipboard, you know, whatever works for you to get that done. I've been doing this a lot, so I have a pretty good calibrated eyeball at this point, but just hold up the edge of a piece of chipboard if you have any doubt about how far away to hold it. You want that to be, pretty accurate there, so don't be afraid to, take up another scrap of chipboard just like this, hold it up to the edge, and put your piece down. So I'll do that here, here, and then here. And then down at this end, we want to come right up to the line, on the inside of the line. So I'll put those pieces on and then I'll be back. So here you can see I've got my ledger strips added. The line is right along this edge here, so I have these butted up right along the line, and the line is at the bottom edge here, and I've held these pieces back the width of my chipboard, which is a 1/16 of an inch. So that's prepped. So now we need ledger strips along the bottom of our cab as well, and again we'll hold them a 1/16 of an inch back from the bottom edge, and when you get to a corner, just hold them back at least a 1/16 of an inch so they don't butt into each other and cause the corners not to come along well. And then I'll also come along on the back and put a strip a 1/16 of an inch away from the bottom edge, and stay away from these vertical edges at least a 1/16 of an inch. So I'll get those pieces put on and then I'll be back. So now I have all of my ledger strips on, and I don't think I said that the ones that go on the cab back go on the inside, not the side with the magnets, on the inside. So before we glue, it's always a good idea to do a dry fit, and so the way this works is the cab front slips down in front of this piece, and when I say in front, this is the front of the locomotive, and it will come right up against those ledger strips, and then these sides will come in this way. The back, and the outside is the side with the magnets on it, will get glued to the end of the box and then to the ledger strips on the sides. And once we have that put together, pretend that's on there, then we can flip it over this way and we can put the cab side bottoms in. Alright, so my dry fit looks good. Excuse me. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this should be a snug fit on here, you want a snug fit, is I'm going to run a bead of glue right along the edge of the ledger strip there on the outside, just the ones in the front here. So right along here, here, and there. And then I'll take my cab front, and I've got it slid in front of there, and then I can just bring it back. And now I like to kind of work at a pretty good pace. I'm going to kind of hold that on there and put a bead of glue along these front strips here. And then I can get my back on. Remember, the magnets are facing out. just grab a baby wipe and get rid of any excess glue. And then I like to take my level and see how things are, so that I have these pieces sitting plumb, and I'm just going to let those sit up and dry. The edges of the back cab here should be flush with this with the opening. Since I moved it, I'll check for plumb again. And I'll be back after that's dried. So my setup is dried thoroughly, and so now I'm going to join the back to the sides by running a bead of glue along these ledger strips here. Make sure I get it lined up. Kind of made a mess with the glue there. And put some good pressure on that. Take a toothpick to this overage I have here. There we go. If you're more comfortable letting this set up and dry on this side before you attach to the other side, go ahead and do that. It's, you know, it's always better to be safe than sorry. And then attach this other side and let that dry thoroughly. And once that back piece is dry, we can add our cab side bottoms, and they fit right inside and rest on those ledger strips that we put in. So just fold back these tabs from the paper and run a bead of glue along the ledger strips. And those cab side bottoms should fit just right inside of there. And then you can remove the score tape backing and fold these tabs in. And once that's dry, you can give that a burnish. And then just repeat that on this other side. And once you have those on there, just make sure that everything is square and plumb, and then let it set aside to dry. So now the cab is all set up and dry, and in our next video we'll move on to constructing the boiler for the locomotive.